and welcome to ECCB Connects. What was the economic position of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union prior to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic? What measures has the ECCB implemented to maintain the stability of the EC dollar? This week, we bring you excerpts from the recent virtual Caribbean Economic Forum, where Governor Antoine addresses these and other issues related to how the Caribbean can rebound after COVID-19. Stay with us. We'll continue after this message.
EC Polymer Notes, our new money.
Here's how you can detect genuine EC Polymer Notes. Feel. Polymer notes feel smoother than the material from which paper notes are made. Also, the front of each note has raised bumps at the top left-hand corner. These bumps form shapes that are familiar to you. Look for the clear window at the front and back of each note. This window allows you to see through the notes. If you hold the notes up to the light, you'll see the value of the note in an area of plain colored print. Tilt. A holographic foil is on the $100, $50, and $20. The images move and their colors change when you tilt the notes. Remember, detecting genuine EC Polymer notes is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Feel, look, and tilt.
EC Polymer Notes. Cleaner, safer, stronger.
Thank you for staying with us. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted lives and affected livelihoods and economies throughout the region and the world. Governor of the ECCB, Timothy N.J. Antoine, joined 3 other regional central bank governors on 25th June at the virtual Caribbean Economic Forum, where they shared perspectives on how the region will navigate these uncertain times and rebound after COVID-19. The Central Bank of Barbados coordinated the forum dubbed COVID and Economic Policy, protecting jobs, businesses, and the economy. In describing the status of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Antoine said that the region was well on its way to experience growth.
The ECCU was actually projecting to grow by 3.5% before the pandemic. Since then, and of now, our latest projection is that we will contract, the ECCU will contract by between 10 and 20% this year alone. So you can see the dramatic change in the economic fortunes of our currency union as a result of the pandemic. But of course, Julian, you would appreciate that this impact is not unique to the ECCU. In fact, the world is facing its worst economic crisis in almost 100 years. We're told that the global economy this year will contract by at least 5%, based on the IMF estimates as of yesterday. And we know the impact has been great on large and small economies. The US is going to contract by 8%, the UK by 10%. Africa, for the first time in 25 years, will actually contract. And of course, all countries in the CARICOM area, with the exception of Guyana, will contract this year. We're all in recession. So that is the starting point. That is where we are at the moment.
The ECCB has maintained the strength of the EC dollar at a rate of 2.7 EC dollars to $1 US for almost 44 years. Governor Antoine believes that this placed the ECCU in a strong position coming into the pandemic and outlined some of the measures the ECCB has taken to help ensure the strength of the EC currency during these challenging times.
One of our principal tasks is to maintain a strong EC dollar. And we do that by maintaining strong foreign reserves to back the EC dollar. So the law says the backing must be at least 60% with foreign reserves. At the moment, we're almost at 100%. And so we've come into the pandemic in a strong position in respect of our foreign reserves. Import cover, foreign reserves, and generally, we believe that we are in a good position to weather this difficult season. So far, the currency continues to perform very well. There's very little change, frankly, between the start of the pandemic and now. But you asked, what have we been doing? So specifically, at the outset of the pandemic, the central bank provided a grant of $4 million to our member countries, $500,000 each, to assist them with critical supplies, equipment and supplies. Because the first rule in fighting a pandemic, the first rule in pandemic economics is to control the pandemic. And truth be told, as a region, we have controlled this pandemic, at least up to this point. Yes, at great sacrifice, to be clear, but we have controlled the pandemic. So that in several countries, including at least half of the ECCU, there are now no active cases of COVID-19. In addition to that, our central bank has worked with the commercial banks to support a loan deferral program of up to 6 months. The credit unions are doing a similar thing, I think, for about 3 months. We've lowered the discount rate, which is a rate at which we lend to banks and governments, to 2%. Before that, it was 6.5%. And for the first time in 17 years, we lowered that rate, the discount rate. And so at this moment, we stand ready as a central bank to provide liquidity to our commercial banks as needed. At this stage, they have not requested that support, partly because, or principally because, they have entered the pandemic well capitalized. But of course, we anticipate that this will be a long, difficult season. And so we stand ready to provide liquidity support as needed. There are other measures, but this is a sample of some of the things that we've done so far.
Governor Antoine believes that it is still early to measure the impact of these actions on member countries. He, however, advances the view that the recovery of the ECCU and regional economies is tied to the recovery of tourism, since these countries are heavily dependent on the sector.
You would appreciate that most of our economies, not just in the ECCU, but around the Caribbean, are tourism-dependent economies. And so to a large extent, the recovery of the regional economy, the recovery of the ECCU, is tied to the recovery of tourism. At this moment, tourism is shut. So the impact that we're seeing in terms of jobs, the impact that we see in terms of revenues in several of our governments, countries, our revenues have plummeted to less than 50%, or at least they've fallen by 50% of what they were pre-COVID. Those impacts are real and continuing. And until and unless tourism reopens, those impacts will continue. And so because our borders are still closed, most countries, and because tourism is likely to have a protracted recovery, we are still at the very early stages, in my estimation, of this situation. And so we are now internally in our countries relaxing, reopening local businesses and so on. So that helps. So in that sense, economic activity has picked up in the last month. But in terms of the macroeconomy, nothing fundamentally or dramatically will change until we're able to get tourism resuscitated or recovered. And that is really the major challenge, I think, that we all face at this time. And that is why there is this significant discussion going on about what are the protocols around which we will reopen our economies to tourism, reopen our borders for tourism.
Governor Antoine is of the view that while the governments and people of the region are doing their best to cope at this time, they could be in a better position if systems like a shock facility were in place. Such facility, he says, would be activated when the economy is hit by shocks such as the current pandemic, which would then trigger a standstill.
The primary and immediate need of our governments is liquidity, cash, to be able to manage their obligations to the citizens, provide basic services, and to take care of course, all the COVID-19 related expenditure. So here you have a situation where the revenues have plummeted, in some cases by as much as 50%, and at the same time, COVID-19 expenditures have grown exponentially. What our region, and certainly the ECCU, would wish is to see a debt stand still on the longer term debt. So I make a distinction between short-term debt, treasury bills, through, for example, the regional government securities market. We continue to operate that market in a normal way. We are rolling over, continuing to make issuances, And in fact, up to earlier this week, I believe it was, or last week, we had earlier this week actually, an oversubscription on the regional government securities market. But we have said before the pandemic and again in this pandemic that we need a facility such that when there is a shock on our economies, as we have now, that there is a debt standstill. So what we would like for longer term debt is a debt standstill of 2 years to allow our countries time to recover before resuming debt servicing. We have fought for this because we believe that all small states should have what we call disaster-linked clauses, otherwise called hurricane clauses. But they can be for any disaster, such that if you have a shock of a certain magnitude, there is a standstill that is agreed upfront between the issuer and the investor. So there is no issue of default. If a situation arises where there is a need, it triggers, the standstill triggers, and you know for a period of time, 1 year, 2 years, you do not service, and then you resume. That is the work we've been doing with the International Capital Markets Association, the IMF and the World Bank for the last several years, the Paris Club. And we have got them to agree to a term sheet. What we need now is the wide adoption of that term sheet. So we pioneered that idea in Grenada in 2014 and 15. It's in those debt clauses. I know Barbados did it recently in its restructuring. But we need to see that widespread for small states so that when there is an event, a hurricane, a pandemic, some kind of economic shock of a certain magnitude, not a rain here and a rain there, but large shocks, we can have the facility. Because what that does is to enable our countries to recover even faster. Because you can invest in recovery and then you resume the debt servicing. So in sum, that is a continuing discussion. So for example, the Caribbean Development Bank has not given debt relief, but what it has done, it has provided a loan for member countries that need it to remain current with the CDB. So if you have a debt of, say, servicing of, say, 20 million, CDB will provide you with a loan of 20 million so you can stay current. Now, that adds to your debt, but it does provide cash flow relief. In the case of the IMF and the World Bank, they do not provide that sort of relief. So what has happened so far is that some of our countries, speaking for the ECCU, 4 of them have gone to the IMF, like Jamaica has done, and gotten rapid credit facilities to the tune of about $81 million to assist with financing. But I will end by saying we need to continue the conversation, because what is happening is that these shocks are happening so regularly that there needs to be a protocol in place that is transparent, that is negotiated upfront, and that can be triggered and effectively implemented when and if needed in a shock.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place at your convenience, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at ECCB Connects.
And now for this week's financial tip.
My name is Jerusha Olivachi. I attend the Rosa Primary School in Dominica. To build intergenerational wealth, start by passing on to your children solid money management skills.
We've come to the end of another episode of ECCB Connects. Thank you for watching. We invite you to connect with us next week for another program.